were left to be discussed. So let's start discussing our first question, which says critically examine whether growing population is the cause of poverty or poverty is the main cause of population increase in India. So it primarily talks about the relationship between poverty and population growth. And the question implies that poverty is a cause of population growth, and also population growth is cause of poverty. So the question talks primarily about these two dimensions, but we have to critically analyze these. So I'll repeat the question. It says critically examine whether growing population is the cause of poverty or poverty is the main cause of population increase in India. Poverty as a cause of population growth. So we have to look into these two dimensions. So if you remember, we were talking about vicious cycle of poverty, which will be covered in detail in your chapter on poverty. So wherein we talk about that poverty being a cause of any of the issues, think of your unemployment. Poverty being a cause of unemployment and poverty being a consequence of unemployment as well. So here we have to think in terms of vicious cycle of poverty. But before getting into the discussion on vicious cycle, let's see, with the existing understanding of the topics that we have, whether we can approach this question or not. So what we have to do is, we have to bifurcate in introduction, body, and conclusion. But before that, also think of, we are saying that poverty is a cause of population growth. But it also can be true that there can be other factors as well. Other factors of population growth. And we have seen, we have gone into the details of what are the other factors of population growth. Similarly, when we say population growth is the cause of poverty, there can be other factors which lead to poverty. So the two dimensions that they have given in the statement, we can split them into four, which can ideally be your body part. Now let's think about what kind of various introductions can we come up with. Let's think in terms of introduction. So Shweta is suggesting we can talk about facts related to population growth and various other factors which influence population. So we can think of using various facts, but we have to be sure that these facts should portray a relationship between poverty and population growth. Can you think of any of these facts? Can you think of any such facts? Then second idea is that again has been suggested by Shweta, that we can think of other factors of population growth. What can be the other factors? Okay. So yes, relationship between poverty and population. So Vaishnav is talking about the inverse relationship between poverty and population growth, that how poverty has been decreasing over the years, whereas population is growing. Great. So other idea can be, let's remove this body from here, other idea can be inverse relationship between poverty and population growth. Great. It's better not to Okay, you are talking about multidimensional poverty index in the context of portraying a relationship between poverty and population growth. Harshita will come to fertility rate, etc. Okay, so the statement suggests, yes, you're right, Sushri. The statement suggests that there is a direct relationship between poverty and population growth. So the question suggests this, but we can think of how there is a possibility of not having a proportional relationship. So one idea can be we can use various facts to portray this relationship between poverty and population growth. Other idea can be thinking of inverse relationship between poverty and population growth. The second introduction that you have suggested, which talks about various other factors of population growth, can be left for the body part, because if you look at the body part, here you have this body part. If you look at the body part, we can think in terms of other factors of population growth and other factors of poverty as well, right? So body part can contain this, and we'll come to what and how we have to write this. We will come to that part. Okay. Another thing is, what about the conclusion? What about the conclusion? What about the conclusion? What can we write in the conclusion part? Suggestions to control and manage both poverty and population growth. Okay, great. This can be one type of conclusion. And also think about the discussion we had when we were talking about various issues related to population growth. We had discussed how population growth can be a desirable phenomena. If we skill these people, if we educate these people, we can ultimately get demographic dividend out of it. Abhishek, let's do one thing. Rather than writing about government schemes, let's stick to the various suggestions, because it's the question talks about both population growth and poverty, and we have to give both due importance. So it is better to keep our question limited to this aspect. So yes, either you write about both the schemes, either you write about both the topics, that how government is targeting poverty and population growth. Okay, so it is fairly simple. The introduction can include various facts wherein we portray a direct relationship between poverty and population growth. Alternatively, we can think of inverse relationship between poverty and population growth. Conclusion can be various suggestions to manage both poverty and population growth. These suggestions can come either from your government intervention, or these can be other suggestions as well. Yes, so the way you are suggesting prohibiting early marriage, etc. Yes, so Sneha, what you are suggesting has also been added. We're talking about how we can convert this huge population in demographic dividend. So these can be our, because this is also a suggestion, right? This is also a suggestion which can be included here. So we can write the conclusion and introduction part. Let's come to the body. Now we are saying the question talks about two dimensions. One is how poverty is a cause of population growth, and the other part is how population growth can lead to poverty, or how population growth is a cause of poverty. Also, we have to include various other factors of population growth and various other factors of poverty. So these two parts, so let me divide this: 1, 2, 3 and 4. They get most of the weightage. I'll just write important, the two dimensions that the question talks about, and the other two dimensions, that is other factors of population growth and other factors of poverty, get comparatively less weightage. Okay, so now let's come to this part: how population can lead to poverty and how poverty can lead to population growth. So just think of this in terms of vicious cycle. Just think of poverty and population growth as a vicious cycle. So I'll just create one vicious cycle once, and then we will come to various factors. Think of this: if a family is poor, they'll tend to give birth to more number of children. Why? Because these children can become helping hands in taking care of the financial security of the family. Now, if you see that the family has limited resources, you have given birth to multiple children, now you would not be able to provide for their education, for their health, for their skilling, etc. If you are not able to provide for these things, it will ultimately lead to less productivity or unemployment. So someone had asked about unemployment. How can we include unemployment here? And if you are unemployed, you remain poor. So we can think of how poverty can ultimately lead to population growth, because if you're poor, then you'll have the tendency of giving birth to more number of children. Now what you have to do is, one, you can, in the body part, you can draw a vicious cycle. You can just split this population growth and write the reasons. So for example, giving birth to more number of children, because they can become helping hands. Right, so one is you can draw this vicious cycle and then come to these parts. So what you do is, when you think of poverty as a cause of population growth, you think of how poor households or poorer households have a tendency of giving birth to more number of children. Then you can come to the other dimension, wherein population growth can become a cause of poverty. So if there's population growth, because ultimately you have to think of poverty growth on a family level, because that is the easiest way to conceptualize, but ultimately you have to think of the nation as a whole, that if the nation has high population, they would not be able to provide for social security, they'll not be able to provide for education for all, better healthcare for all. Then also people will end up living in, say, slums. They would not get proper nutritious food, which will ultimately lead to poverty, because these are various factors of poverty. And when we discuss poverty, and we discuss multidimensional poverty in particular, you'll find out that how sanitation, how lack of clean cooking fuel, how lack of healthcare facilities ultimately contribute to poverty. That we will discuss there. So here you can just simply understand right now, and you will get exact points to write when we discuss poverty. But before discussing poverty, please try to write this answer. Now, one part is how poverty is cause of population growth. Other part is how poverty growth, or how population growth is a cause of poverty. Then come to other factors. What can be the other factors of population growth? So what you can do is, once you're done with this major part, use a small paragraph and briefly write other factors, that it is not just poverty which can lead to population growth, but there can be other factors as well. Can you suggest those factors? Yes, you can definitely give examples of how poverty can lead to population growth. Yes, think of other factors. Yes, there can be geographical factors, political factors, economic factors, the main ideas. But if you remember, when we were talking about population growth, we were thinking in terms of migration, we were thinking in terms of fertility rate and birth rate. So it is better to stick to this categorization because this is fairly easy. This is easier compared to the other one. And there won't be any overlap for that matter. So yes, because of poverty, they would not have awareness about family planning. Sorry, we are talking about population growth. So lack of awareness of family planning can lead to population growth. Similarly, there can be, yes, the role of religion. Because of religious beliefs, people might tend to give birth to more number of children. So your contraceptive measures, etc., are included in family planning. Yes, there can be early marriage, right? Absolutely. So you can think of various factors like preference to son, patriarchal mindset of the society, etc. So there can be various factors, various other factors apart from poverty, which can contribute to population growth. So this is done. What you have to do is you have to just contain it in a very small paragraph in 2 or 3 lines maximum. Then let's come to the fourth part, which says what can be the other factors of poverty apart from population growth. Now, poverty, if you think of poverty, you can think of various political reasons. Say the government is not investing sufficient amount of money in social security. Similarly, you can think of various economic reasons, not being able to provide enough jobs, right? There can be social reasons, restricting particular caste or people from a particular class from taking up any other economic opportunity. So there can be various social, political, environmental factors which contribute to poverty. Need not worry about all these factors. Yes, so you are right. You're talking about inflation. You're talking about lack of availability of resources, right? So there can be other factors. Need not worry about it. When we discuss poverty, we are going to discuss all the factors which impact poverty in greater detail. And what we'll do is there we are going to create this vicious cycle for all the factors, that how all those factors which lead to poverty are actually a consequence of poverty as well. The way we have discussed population growth and poverty, we said that poverty can lead to population growth, and also population growth can be a consequence of poverty. So in the similar manner, we are going to discuss vicious cycle of poverty in your chapter on poverty. From there, you will get exact points which all you can mention here. So I'll just repeat the question. The question is not that complicated. It is a fairly simple question. All you have to do is just break it down. So we are talking about growing population being the cause of poverty. So one idea is how population growth can lead to poverty. Other idea is what can be the other factors that lead to poverty. Then the second part is how poverty can lead to population growth and what can be other factors of population growth. And introduction and conclusion have already been provided. So in this manner, you can cover this question or cover this part holistically, right? And try to give the introduction. Maybe it's better to talk about the inverse relationship between population growth and poverty. And can someone suggest, on this note, can someone suggest inverse relationship between poverty and population growth? Inverse relationship between poverty and population growth. Just think about it. To start your answer, you can use this definitely. No, not impact on economy. We are talking about, the question says poverty will lead to population growth and population growth will lead to poverty. What we are saying is, give example of how poverty might not lead to population growth. So yes, people, so it can be on a psychological level. It can be on a psychological level that people might understand that yes, they can be poor, but it is not necessary that they are not aware. And they might think that if we give birth to more number of children, how are we going to feed them? And again, this mindset of giving birth to more number of children as they are going to become helping hands in the future was limited till your industrial era. If you remember the demographic transition, we were talking about how the birth rates have gone low, right? Then lack of availability of healthcare might lead to a rise in infant mortality rate. So one idea is that infant mortality rate, if it is high, it will ultimately make people to give birth to more number of children. But also if you look at it, it is directly contributing to a decrease in population, right? Great. So this way you can show an inverse relationship between population growth and poverty. So I hope this question is clear. Please try writing this answer because it needs only a little understanding from poverty, and most of the things have been discussed here in population. So please try writing this answer and let's see how well you write. Let's move to our next question. The next question says, empowering women is the key to control population growth. Now, if you remember, this question has already been discussed with role of women, has been discussed in your chapter 4, that is role of women. This question has already been discussed, right? So just give a quick thumbs up if you can write this answer, if you can deal with this question. Okay, great, because this question has already been given. Now think of another question. In your newspaper, you have a lot of talks going around about the delayed census. If you think of population, what is the best way to account population in a country? It is census, because they'll go door to door, they'll go household to household to collect the data, right? Now the census has been delayed. Every 10 years we generally have census. Now again, it is not mandated by the constitution to have the census in every 10 years, but yes, census has constitutional backing, because you'll find it mentioned in various chapters. You'll find it mentioned in multiple places in your census, because ultimately your various sample surveys that happen, they are also based on census data. Your delimitation exercise, that is also based on census data, right? Now if this census is delayed, and it has already been delayed for 2 years now. Now, because the census is delayed, there can be consequences. This can become a potential question. They might ask that what can be the possible consequences of a delayed census? What can be the consequences of delayed census? Because generally in your newspapers and your TV debates, you find that it is more about the political idea. It is more about how the ruling party is avoiding the census because of various factors, because of the idea of fertility rate, that the way ruling party portrays that higher fertility rates are associated to a particular religion, that might not be true. So they are afraid of that. The OBC population data might come out. That can become a problem. The effect of all the policies, right? So when we talk about sample survey, we have data, but again, it is a very limited exercise. It is a very limited sample size, and it does not give a clear picture, whereas census gives a clear picture. So all the arguments that you find are there, are related to various political issues, but we do not have to get into those issues, because no one's going to ask that why the ruling party is delaying the census. Is it deliberate or not deliberate? Because that is something we cannot comment upon. But what can definitely be asked is, what can be the various consequences of this delayed census? Now, let's see, what can you suggest? Okay, so you are already suggesting the problems related to delayed census. So the first idea is, what about your policy making? Think of various programs. Think of your National Food Security Act, for instance. What does it need? It needs census data to find out the targeted population. Think of various other policies. Can you possibly think of other policies? Because for that you should know that what all is contained in census. Yes, so delimitation is delayed. Because now we cannot mark the constituencies, we cannot take up this delimitation exercise, which is important, right? Because it has been 10 years, a lot has changed, a lot of people have migrated. What about the policies for migrants? A lot of new problems have come up. We have not been able to tackle this menace of infant mortality rate. What about those issues? So one idea is, yes, it is going to impact public policy, and therein what you can do is you can talk about various things, right? Think of your reservation, the idea of reservation, think of your MG Narega, think of National Food Security Act. You can give ideas about this. Also, think of your sample surveys. Think of various reports that come out. Everything is ultimately based in census. Yes, so the idea about illiteracy rate, so that we know which group or which section of the society has to be targeted when it comes to illiteracy. Which section of the society has to be targeted when it comes to nutritional requirements. And again, say they are going to go again with socio-economic caste census. If you remember, 2011 one was a socio-economic caste census. Now, if they are going with that, we would get to know which caste is still lagging behind, what kind of intervention is required, etc. So if you think of various consequences of a delayed census, you can think of various policies for various sections and just split it. Just split it into various parts and also include your delimitation exercise. So, we cannot necessarily say that the data provided by various other organizations is manipulated, right? We cannot make that argument because we do not know. So the simple idea is, if you think of the problems or the consequences related to census, first think of the significance of census. Now, the census is going to, it happens in two ways. So they are going to take up the household data, then they are going to take up the various details of individuals. Now just think of its significance. If you understand the significance of census, then you can definitely think of what will be the consequences of this delayed census. Try avoiding the political points, try avoiding the arguments that why it has been delayed, or say it has been deliberately delayed or not. So rather than going into those arguments, just look at it from a neutral point of view. Okay, so I hope this idea is clear. This is something you just keep an eye on because most of the preparation has already been done for census. But then when the counting was to start, when the process was to start, we got affected by COVID. But now it has already been 2 years since the since the deadly wave of COVID has subsided. So yes, it is high time we take up census process, because ultimately the data to be processed and to actually come out will take a few months, 2 years. If you remember the previous census, it took close to 3-4 years to release the entire data, right? So that in itself is a long process. So why delay this census? Yes, so the idea that the data might become a problem to elections in the country should be avoided, right? Let's avoid that idea. So if you think of elections, think of constituency delimitation. That is the limit till where we have to reach. Okay, so this was all about your chapter on population. The next section of the syllabus that we are entering is various issues related to regionalism, communalism, and secularism as an answer to communalism. So what we'll do is we'll first take up communalism. Now, when we think of communalism, everyone might have some idea about communalism, because you read newspapers as aspirants and you find that every now and then there is something related to communal violence in one or the other area. Then you also think of communalism when you discuss your post-independence history. And if you remember, there we say that it is primarily because of the divisive policies of the Britishers that we find this problem becoming a menace, becoming violent. That is of communalism. So we are going to take up every aspect related to communalism, but when it comes to the historical dimension, it has already been covered with history. So we are going to just go through briefly. We're just going to go through briefly through the history of communalism, and we will focus more on the political and the social dimension. Now, to understand communalism, the first thing is that the base word is commune or community. Now, if you think of a community, it can be any group of people who have some shared interest, right? But when we think in terms of India, you have to limit this idea to religion. So when we think of a community in context of India, that community is basically religion, because it is primarily religious conflicts or religious violence that we see in India. Yes, there is definitely caste-based violence. Yes, there is violence based on various races. But ultimately, when we think of the idea of communalism, because it is clubbed with secularism, we have to restrict our discussion to religion. Now, when we say that, because if you see in India, there is a lot of religious diversity. Now, with this religious diversity, you see that people have various social groups or various religious groups have different practices, have different rituals. Now, just my first question is it necessary that with this diversity, with this religious diversity that we have, we'll definitely have communalism? We are going to discuss the definition of communalism, but think about it. So one idea is that we have diversity in India. We have religious diversity. So is it necessary to have communal conflicts because of this diversity? And the answer is no. And this is something we have already read with diversity. So one idea is that it is not just because of diversity that we face this problem of communalism. Okay. Now, when we go through this idea of communalism, we are going to emphasize more on the political aspect, that is your communal politics, because ultimately it is your religious groups, it is your political groups who incite this violence or who propagate this idea of communalism, who basically divide people. So the way we say that divisive policies of the Britishers, the idea of divide and rule, the idea of communal award, the idea of separate electorates, this is something that became the starting point of communalism in India. We see that till today, it is your political class, it is your various socio-religious groups, which basically put this idea in heads of people that you have to be violent against the other community. And we will think about communalism, we'll think about all the phases, etc. But you just remember this, it is mostly because of communal politics that we find this idea prevalent. Okay, so coming back to communalism. So communalism basically is a belief that those who have a common religion, as a result of this common religion, they have all their interests to be common. They have their social, political, cultural, economic, etc. interests common as well. So think of this simply that there are Hindus and there are Muslims. The basic idea behind communalism is that all the Hindus, just because they have a similar religion or they follow the same religion, just because of this fact, all of them will have similar interests. Similarly, if you talk about Muslims or if you talk about Christians, just because they follow the same religion, all the individuals have all the other interests similar as well. They would want same kind of things from life. They would want their political, they would want same political leaders to lead them. They would want similar kind of economic development. This is what the basic assumption behind communalism is. Now, if you think of communalism, you think of it in phases. You think of communalism in phases. If you look at this, first idea is, the primary idea is that the interest of all the members of a religious community are same. Now, these can be secular interests, which are anything apart from religion, or these can be interests related to religion. That people, if you look within the Hindu community, you'll find that there are people from various castes, there are people from various classes, then there are people from different genders. So just because they have a same religion, the idea of communalism says or assumes that they'll have all the other interests similar as well. Can you think of this? Interests of someone from the so-called lower caste and interests of someone from the so-called upper caste being same. Interests of a peasant and someone working in a service sector are same. And you see that this is a mere assumption. This is a mere assumption that all these interests, both secular and non-secular, will be same. Yes, your religious interests can be same. You might want to practice, or you might want to follow similar practices when it comes to religion. But your non-secular interests or any other interest apart from religion might not be same, because there is a lot of class divide, there is caste divide, there is a gender divide within that community. But this idea of communalism overlooks all those differences, all the diversity that we have within that community, and thinks of people having similar interests, right? Because there'll be people who are coming from different linguistic backgrounds. There can be a Tamil Hindu, there can be a Bengali Hindu, there can be a Marathi Hindu. Now, considering that they are from the same religion, they will definitely have similar interests, which is a basic assumption, which is an idea that sounds ridiculous. Even though it sounds ridiculous, but it is widely prevalent, right? Because we have to question ourselves as well. When it comes to the matters of communalism, we have to question ourselves as well, whether we have this kind of mindset or not. Okay, so the first stage is that interests, both secular and non-secular interests of people coming from the same religion are same. Now, the second idea is that not just these interests within this community are same, but they are also different from the other community. So you have this group of Hindus, you have this group of Muslims. First idea is that all the interests of people within this Hindu community are same. Second idea is that the interests of these Hindus and Muslims are different. The interests of this group and the other group are different. And the third stage of communalism is that not just these ideas are different, but they are also conflicting. That if a Muslim wants to say, wants to set up a business, it is definitely going to be against the interests of Hindus. These are basic stages of communalism, but you'll find that all of these are basic assumptions, mere assumptions, which do not have any solid ground for that matter. So the first idea being that interests of people belonging to the same group are same. Then these interests are different from people belonging to another group. And not just that these interests are different, but they are antithetical or they are conflicting as well. These are three stages of communalism. So as long as we stay here, we do not have a problem. Because people might think that a poor farmer and your big businessmen have similar interests. It is still fine to this extent. And when you say that, yes, interest based on various interests of various communities can be different, then also you can still agree to a certain point. So it is still mild till here. But once you cross this line, once you cross this bar, you find that it becomes a problem. it becomes a problem. Why? Because ultimately, if you feel that the interests are conflicting, if they want to go this way, you are necessarily going to go this way, and there can be no consensus between the two communities, which becomes a problem, which can ultimately lead to communal violence. Because just think about this. We come from different regions, we come from different linguistic backgrounds, we come from different religious backgrounds. As long as you have a sense of brotherhood within that community, it is still fine. It is not a problem. Yes, once you start favoring someone because of the say shared religion, because of similar religion, it becomes a problem. But otherwise, just having a feeling of brotherhood, just having a feeling of connectedness with people belonging to your own community is still fine. But once you start thinking that we as a community have conflicting interests with them, so the idea of we versus them, then it becomes a problem, because it can ultimately lead to any form of violence. And this violence has become very common. This violence has become very common recently. Because if you see that on the peripheries of your national capital, we had communal violence, which stayed for days, which happened in various pockets across across one state primarily, that is the state of Haryana, but in 2-3 regions. Coming back to the idea of communalism, now when you start having this, say, sense of conflicting, this sense of conflict of interest with the other community, you start developing a feeling of hatred. You'll start feeling like committing violence against the other community. This is what? This is basically a manifestation of communalism. So if you want to write a definition, you can use any of these for that matter. They have a similar connotation. But yes, they differ in the degree. So for example, here we are simply at the first stage. We are saying that people who share a common religion, they have all the other interests similar. Then if you look at the other definition, it takes you to the third stage directly. It says that people from different religious groups have a sense of animosity against each other. They have a feeling of hatred and committing violence against each other. So you can use these definitions, but always remember that always remember this in your mind, that just having say a sense of belongingness, just having a sense of brotherhood, just having a sense of cooperation with your own community is not a problem in itself. The problem is having hatred towards others, committing violence towards others. Now, just look at a few basic assumptions that we have discussed. Now, one of the basic assumptions is that India has been a diverse country. You have prevalence of various religions. You have various religions that are based here in this country, and it is necessary that there will be conflicts. And this is being the idea is being perpetuated by a few thinkers, mostly your foreign thinkers, that India, being a diverse country, has always been vulnerable to communal violence. And they also give examples. They cite instances. From medieval history, for example, that there was a perpetual conflict among Hindu and Muslims. But again, you'll find that if you talk about, say, plunder of the temples, etc., generally it was done for economic gain. Generally, though, the idea of expansion, the idea of imperialism, expanding your boundaries, was the motive. That every kingdom felt that we should go on increasing our boundary. Right? So it is not just Muslims who plundered temples. There were various other Hindu leaders as well who have done so. And you have examples from your ancient and medieval history, for that matter. So yes, there are ideas which can indicate towards a communal conflict between various religious groups, but you'll find that it was not so. The intent was different. It was not just out of sheer hatred towards one community, because in those when armies march, it is not just one particular community that gets killed. Right, in India again has been a diverse country. You have people belonging to various religious groups living in those kingdoms. There are warriors among them. There are normal people, common men, common people among them, which also get killed. So if you think in matters of war, wars are not discriminatory for that matter. The violence is indiscriminate. They would not spare anyone on the basis of religion, right? So the first idea is that communalism was not inherent in Indian society. Just because we have diversity, it was not inherent. Similarly, communalism is not merely entry of religion into politics. Now, just think about this idea. One idea is that we are saying that it is primarily because of communal politics, it is primarily because of politics of hatred, it is primarily because of divisive politics that we find communalism in a country. But again, communalism is not just limited to the entry of religion in politics, because you have various leaders. Can someone cite an example? You have various leaders who took religion and politics very well. That there was a good blend of politics and religion. Okay, so one thing is that try not to give very, say, current examples of the political leaders who are there now. It's better to use examples from the past. That most of you are suggesting Mahatma Gandhi, which is a brilliant example for that matter. Try, and you can think of the coming together of Hindus and Muslims during your various social movements. Right, during your various social movements, please try to stay away from current examples of political leaders who are there today. Okay, so the idea being that just because of religious differences, just because of diversity, communalism might not happen. It is not a necessary condition for the issue of communalism. Then also, communalism is not simply the entry of religion into politics, because we have examples from there. We have already looked at the phases of communalism. Now think of how it emerged in India. We are saying that just because of our religious diversity, it is not necessary to have communal conflicts. And we have discussed this in slight detail during your Unity in Diversity chapter. Now, it is primarily said that with the entry of Britishers in a country, with the feeling that Britishers had that if Hindus and Muslims, because primarily it was based in Hindus and Muslims, so if Hindus and Muslims come together, they can be a force to reckon with. They can be a force who can oust us. So just because of this fear of Britishers, just because of and out of this fear, they came up with various politics of divided rule. Just think about this, because it did not start right away with, say, your separate electorates or your 1909 reforms. It started on a very subtle level. So they started discussing with various religious leaders, and they would try to say get them on their side by saying that we are going to provide these opportunities for your people from your community. And they started it on both the sides. And if you remember the leaders, the leaders who were there, who ultimately became a force behind this issue of communalism, and if you look at them, they were generally working for, or they were generally negotiating with the Britishers for betterment of their own community. The idea of hatred towards other community, etc., was not there. But slowly and steadily, as they started making it a part of their policies, it started becoming more clear that it is the intention of the Britishers to keep them away. So think of your partition of Bengal. Even though the idea was that it is based in, say, administrative, or say defining the administrative limits, for it is meant for administrative ease, but ultimately you see that it was more on the communal lines. Then similarly later they came up with separate electorate, then later the idea of communal award, and ultimately you see the seed that they have sown in the Indian society of this hatred against each other, of this hatred against the other community, bore fruit in terms of your the demand for separate state on the basis of religion. Then ultimately the communal violence that happened during partition, and thereon if you see that since partition, yes, we do not have as many incidents, but again it is becoming frequent that people are having this feeling more, people are having this feeling that the feeling of us versus them, that we are from one community, one religious community, and there are people from other religious community, our ideas are conflicting and we cannot stay together. And the idea is both the parties want the other one to leave the country, right? That is what the idea is. Or else they want to create a separate state. They want to create a state in the name of religion, right? On the basis of religion. So if you see historically, it is generally based in the divisive politics of the Britishers, and it did not just happen on a political level. If you think about various writings of Britishers, of various British authors or various Western authors, you'll find that in their writings they gave due importance, or they kept it focused towards one dimension. So most of the writings were inclined towards portraying that in the Hindus and Muslims have never gotten along very well. So they will talk about various incidents wherein two communities were involved, without highlighting the fact that they were for some other reason. They were not based in the hatred against each other's community. So they started rewriting the history on communal lines, so that ultimately the common masses as well get that feeling and they do not get together. Now if you think about this, one is historical idea that how it took shape in the country, but now you see that still now the Britishers have left. We can go on making peace within the communities and between communities as well. But why is it not happening? What are the other factors that promote communalism? Before we get into the PPT, just think about various ideas, various factors which promote communalism in a country. Can you think of it? Because you watch TV, on your social media, in your your news media, you find these kind of political debates happening, which primarily are meant to divide the society in various communities. Then yes, one idea is communal politics that we will come to. Okay, just talk about other factors. What can be the other factors? Who are the people who are generally part of this mob which commits communal violence? So yes, idea of religious superiority or ethnocentrism for that matter. Yes, so young and particularly people who are not educated, not well educated, people who have more influence of religion than your secular education. Yes, people who are unemployed. Then you have various religious and political organizations which radicalize these people. So ultimate idea is that it is based in communal politics. It is based in the politics of various religious leaders and political leaders. Then yes, there can be role of other countries behind the in perpetrating this communal violence. Great. So there can be role of state and non-state actors. So yes, vote bank politics is there. Then again, it can be because of misinterpretation of various religious texts. Great. Because generally, if you see that, if you look at the various the acts of communal violence that happen, generally it is people from weaker socioeconomic background who are part of these mobs. So yes, your political leaders incite, or political leaders with their speeches, they incite that feeling of hatred among people, but ultimately it is the people who are not very well educated, who are not aware of the basics, who become a part of this. So with this understanding, so you have a fair understanding of what can lead to communalism. What we'll do is we'll restructure these ideas, because a question has been already asked in the past wherein they talk about two specific dimensions, and I'll show you that question. So what we have to do is we have to look at all the ideas, all the factors that promote communalism, and also remember that it can be any of this idea. So yes, now you are finally coming to economic idea, because till now we were limited to social and political factors behind promotion of communalism in the country. Now Hanuman is talking about the idea of, say, economic disparity. Now let's look at these factors one by one, because a question can be asked on any of these dimensions. So a question has already been asked on political and economic dimension. They can very well ask a question on any other dimension as well. Okay, starting with various psychological factors that contribute to this. Now you would have seen that again most of our ideas will come from the contemporary politics, political leaders. Now you find that there is an idea going on which says that if given time, the rate of growth of population of the other community is very high, and give it time, give it a few years, they'll ultimately overwhelm the entire country with their population. And particularly it is said in relation to Muslims that the rate at which the population of Muslims in the country is growing because of, say, because of giving birth to multiple children, that ultimately few years down the line they will have more population compared to any other religious community in our country. And once they have it, once they reach that population mark, once they become stronger in terms of numbers, they are going to overpower each and every community in the country. This is one idea. So just think about this. One thing is misinterpretation of various facts, because this is something that is not practically possible, right? If you interpolate, if you go into the statistics of these numbers, you'll find that it is impractical. One. Second thing is that they are creating a sense of fear. They are creating a sense of fear amongst one community, that you have a threat, you have an outstanding threat from the other community. This is in terms of future and population projection. Now this fear can be imbibed using contemporary examples. They can use examples of, look at that area, say this area is Hindu dominated, you have more Hindus living here in this area, and look at the way they treat the Muslims, because it happens both way. When we look at communalism, when we think of communalism, it is happening both ways. It cannot be just, say, one community. If there is a community which is in majority and it is the community which so it is, say, a homogeneous society, then the idea of communalism would not be there, right? The communalism would be based on other factors other factors apart from religion. So it needs at least two communities for this idea to be there. So inciting fear amongst people, creating insecurity amongst people that the other community is a threat to your existence, is a threat to your business, is a threat to your family, is a threat to the future of your family, to the future of your nation. So one idea is this, it is happening on a psychological level. But again, it is not happening by default. Just think of it. You're living in a city. You're living in a city and you find people from various backgrounds. The cities, in terms of the population, you find the cities to be very diverse. Do you feel a sense of threat? Do you feel any kind of insecurity with respect to other communities? Because there are people coming from various linguistic backgrounds. There are people coming from various religious backgrounds. Do you get that feeling naturally at all? And the answer would be no, because there is no immediate threat. You're going to your office, you're going to a college, you're going to a school, and there are people from other backgrounds, that there are people you have never seen or known in your life. There are people coming from a linguistic background that you do not even understand. It can be a very, say, primitive dialect out of a major language. But you would not naturally feel threatened. So this, all these ideas, all these factors are basically coming from your communal politics, right? So you remember that, because these are not natural feelings. So the feeling of fear and insecurity. Then there can be trauma. So once a conflict happens, just think of the communities, both Hindu and Muslim, who are living in your region of Nu, who are living in this Mewat region of Haryana. Now, for whatever factors, for whatever reasons the conflict happened, but the idea is that the conflict happened. And in that conflict, a lot of people got injured, a lot of people got killed, a lot of people had to flee from there, leave their livelihoods behind, and move to migrate to other places. Now think of the trauma in their minds. Because ultimately, it will be people from, say, it can be people from any community who will help them to relocate, who will help them to rehabilitate to a different region. But ultimately, the idea will be there that it was because of the other community that we had to go through all this. Because this will be the idea slowly pushed into their heads, pushed into their minds by the people of their own community. That it was because of the other community that you had to go through all this, that you had to stay in refugee camps, that you had to lose your livelihood, you had to lose your house, you had to lose your children, for that matter. So because of these rights that happen, the trauma will remain. Now also you'll see that on a political level, you'll find that if these people are not the ones who become victims of this violence, if they are not rehabilitated in time, if they are not provided with any kind of security in the future, that will also become a reason for them to have hatred against the other community. Why? Just because the government did not intervene in time. So rather than having hatred against those, say, communal leaders, having hatred against the government, or questioning the government that why didn't you act in time when you had cues about, say, possibility of a conflict or possibility of a violent conflict, they will ultimately bear that grunt against the other community. Then because of any kind of misleading information, and you see that not just in case of your religious conflicts, but other conflicts as well. If you think of the ethnic conflict that happened in Manipur, it was based in a misleading information. It was based in an image or a video that was from Delhi, that was from a region way far from where they're living, and it was a completely different incident. And based on that misleading information, people took to committing violent crimes. Similarly, not just misleading information, because this misleading information might not always lead to a violent conflict, Because think of the misleading information that you get on your television, that you get on your news debates. That will also have an impression in your mind. That will also make you think that yes, they might be right, because generally we take whatever is there on the social media, whatever is there on your news media, we take it for granted. We take it at its face value, that someone has put in efforts there, someone has very well articulated, and it can be true. And it is not just limited to the, say, illiterate sections of the society. It is widespread amongst other people as well. Then you think of globalization, you think of urbanization, people living in urban areas, because generally it was assumed that these violent conflicts happen in rural areas because you have widespread illiteracy, and not just illiteracy, but also people are there is widespread poverty as well. So it is easier to incite this violence among people. But we find that now it is happening more and more in the cities. So because of urbanization, because of people having to live away from their community, having to live away from their hometown, they find themselves alone. They have a sense of, say, solitude in the cities. Now the gap that is there is filled by various religious groups, by various religious and political leaders. So they'll absorb that information, they might start following them, and ultimately it will lead to them having a feeling of hatred against the other community, because they were there, they started following their religion. Because there are people who never followed or practiced any ritual related to the religion when they were living at home, but once they come out of home, once they once they start having that feeling of insecurity, living in the cities or living away from your hometown, you find them becoming religious, you find them following religious leaders, you find them following political leaders, because they have to fill in that gap. And this can ultimately lead to a feeling of hatred amongst others. So yes, the rumors that were spread in Northeast, similarly, the videos that were recorded and spread amongst the masses from both the communities, in the case of Haryana, they became the reason for the violent conflicts. Now think of economic factors. A question has already been asked. A question has already been asked on this dimension, that how economic factors can lead to communal conflicts. People living in poverty, because if you look at the communal violence that happens, mostly it is the poor who get affected by it. If you look in the case of Haryana, in the cases of Delhi, in the cases of Uttar Pradesh, you'll find that it is generally the poor who become who are ultimately the agents of perpetuating this violence, and who also become the victims of this violence, right? Because it is generally spread in these localities, because they are densely populated, and the other community thinks that we can harm more and more number of people in a very short span of time. So they will generally target these densely populated colonies, these densely populated slums, right? So one, they are the ones who get affected by it, but also you'll find that it is easy. So one is, they will bear that trauma from the past, which they will pass on to the generations that are there to come. They will tell their children, who are going to tell their children, so on and so forth. So it will be there. The trauma will travel through generations. And also, you'll find that it is easy if someone's not aware, if someone's not educated, because you cannot, say, argue with them saying that this is not statistically possible. Look at these facts. They would not believe in those. So they are the ones who can easily be brainwashed, who can easily be targeted to become the agents of this violence. So this unemployment, because they are free, the ones who are working, they limit their things, they limit their ideas to whatever is happening around them, what is happening at the workplace. Is there something new, a new skill that I can pick up, whether I can switch the job or not? Right? They just limit themselves to their family and their work life. But the ones who are unemployed, the ones who are living in poverty, are the ones who become the agents. Yes, so see, in case of Manipur again, yes, you can say it. You can say that it is also a communal conflict. It is basically an ethnic conflict. In case of India, when we think of communalism, we generally think of religion. But yes, we cannot detach Manipur incident from there. But again, we have to limit our discussions to the basics of communalism here, citing examples. Right, so we are definitely using examples from there. Even if you get a question, you will get a question on ethnic conflicts. You'll get a question on communal conflicts. What can be the factors? What can be the way forward? Rather than the factual details of that incident. So you generally do not get, if you look at the question papers, you do not get questions out of the factual details of any of the incident. You ultimately get a question from what is the basic, what is the reason behind it. And you can apply the same logic there as well, right? So be it rumor mongering, be it spreading misinformation, be it having hatred against other community, what can be the various reasons? Then you think of the role of various political and social leaders. All these logic apply and extend there as well. Okay. Now, if you think of any of the poorer or underdeveloped countries, and even developing countries to that extent, you'll find more and more number of communal conflicts happening. The reason is the general general standard of living of people. Because if the state itself is weak economically, they would not be able to take care of various basic needs of the people. And you find that when the people have to actually question their government, that why are we not being provided enough resources? Why can't you provide us education? Why can't there be a rise in the levels of employment? Ultimately, they get they get misled by those very political leaders who are actually responsible. Those very political leaders who are actually responsible for this condition, they get misled by them into thinking that it is the other community because of which I'm suffering, because of which I'm not able to get a job. Just think of this, that the idea of outsiders. Even when you think of various states, various regions, just take the recent example of violence that has been committed against people coming from outside in Bangalore. The idea being that these people who are coming from outside, living in this area, are ultimately stealing the jobs, are ultimately a direct threat to your economic security. So rather than questioning the government, rather than questioning those political leaders, people get misled by them. And you find this happening if you look at, say, Afghanistan. If you look at now, if you see that it is increasing in India as well. At the same time, when we say that India has been and will remain a tolerant, or has been and is a tolerant community, tolerant society, we find more and more number of these conflicts happening. So yes, we are tolerant to a great extent. We are amazing when it comes to tolerance. But our tolerance is limited to whatever misleading information is being provided on our news channels, whatever misleading information is being given to us by our political leaders. We are very tolerant of that information. But when it comes to other community, when it comes to various other issues, then we find that we lose our tolerance way too quick. Okay, coming back. Then the idea of stealing others' jobs, the idea of being a burden on the resources there, which can also lead to communal violence. The recent example of Bangalore that I've given. Similarly, you'll find that because again it can be based in religion, it can be based in region as well. You'll find that if you think of Rohingya migrants, if you think of them, you'll find that it was primarily on the basis of the religion that they were targeted. That once they reach here, once they once they are led to enter a country, they'll become an internal security threat. They'll be the ones who'll take your jobs, who are going to take over your land, who are going to take over your businesses, etc. Now, all these ideas were political in nature. All these ideas were again political in nature because there is no immediate threat. Because think of people who migrate to, say, other state. If you think of regionalism, there are people who will migrate to other state to work. Ultimately, they contribute to the economy of that place. It's not that yes, ultimately the idea of urbanization can be a problem because of increased population density. But you think of this, their government is not able to provide them employment at their own place. Once they go from one place to another, then the people who are living there, they say, you are an outsider, you are here to steal our jobs, you are here as a burden on our resources, please go away. So again, if you look at this, why is the government at the place here, to the place where people have migrated, why the governments are not able to create more employment? Why the government's not able to provide social security? So rather than questioning the political class, people go for having this hatred amongst each other. Then there can be this idea of economic competition. Same shop, same product, people from two religious groups, people having a different religious identity, a Hindu tailor and a Muslim tailor. So rather than thinking it of as an economic competition, they'll take it up as a communal conflict, as something that is based in religion. So rather than improvising that, okay, the other person is getting more business compared to me, that means there is something about my product or the services that I provide which needs to be changed, which needs to be made better. Rather than doing that, they think of this economic competition as something communal in nature. They think of chasing away the other person, chasing away the other business, so that the entire market is left to themselves. So this communal hatred can be based on economic competition as well. Think of various social ideas. The primary idea is the role of media and social media. The primary idea is role of media and social media. That this media, the way they conduct debates, the taglines that you see on the news channels, both Hindi and English channels. It is not just limited to Hindi channels. Even if you look at English channels, you'll find that these statements itself, the statements themselves are are something that should not be done, are something very communal. And see, Jhansi, you're talking about laborers migrating to Tamil Nadu, Bihari laborers migrating to Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc., and becoming a conflict. Now, those are based in regionalism. Yes, you'll find that at times regionalism and communalism go hand in hand. But ultimately, when we think of communalism, the primary idea is people coming from various religious groups, from different religious groups. But when we think of regionalism, the basic idea is, the base word is region. People coming from the same region, people speaking the same language, people experiencing the same culture. So there is a difference. Yes, at times they go hand in hand, that there are people who have migrated from other state and they are from this religion. So yes, it can work that way, and it happens a lot. But ultimately, both are different thoughts. So the negative role of media and social media, and when we are going through these factors, I hope you are able to understand what can be the suggestions. So if you're talking about, say, the issue of poverty, deal with poverty, give people gainful employment so that they can take care of their basic needs and they do not have say enough time, or they do not have enough energy to invest in this communal idea, right? Similarly, if you think of the role of media and social media, it has to be regulated. Media particularly has to be regulated so that they ultimately do not become the vehicles of spreading communal violence. Then you think of all the factors related to religion. You think of the role of your various religious organizations that they play. You think of your various socio-political organizations as well. That if you think, there was recently news that a particular organization in Assam is training people with weapons, is training the youngsters with weapons. Why? To fight against the other community. So the role of these organizations, the role of these religious organizations in misinterpreting various religious spiritual texts, that's saying that it is there in your it is at the heart of your religion to overpower the other community, to take over the other community, to have hatred against the other community. Similarly, these organizations can also misinterpret various historical books, various texts based in history. They will just show one side of any kind of historical incidents. Rather than giving a complete picture, rather than being neutral about it, they will make it very biased. It is the same book, it is the same text, but they will only highlight one side of it. Similarly, they can use such texts which are written in a very biased manner. Then you think of your marketing of religion. Now, with the spread of religion, now marketing of religion can be understood as the way the modern world experiences religion. You think in terms of your various channels dedicated to, say, particular sect, for instance. You think of various products, commodities that you find in the market based in religion. You think of various religious identities or religious identity markers that you find in the market. Now, because of this, there'll be an unhealthy competition between people from other religion. You think of various, if you think about various marches that happen in the name of religion, various gatherings that happen in the name of religion, they can also be related to this marketing of religion. The people want to perpetuate their religion more and more, which ultimately leads to an unhealthy competition amongst these communities. And this unhealthy competition is not limited to marketing, but if you find various revivalist movements, not of the past, but even of today, wherein they talk about going back to your scriptures, where they talk about reviving the religion, reviving the true essence of the religion, that also leads to this unhealthy competition between people from various communities, people from various religious groups, which can ultimately become a factor of communal conflict. Then lack of education can be simply understood. Then you think of ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism, the idea being, ethno means the same ethnic group, and centrism, centered in that same ethnic group, that my ethnic group or the group that I belong to, the social group that I belong to, is the best amongst all the other options. We are the purest, we are the ones who are very superior. And this you'll find in various practices wherein they'll try to justify various religious practices with science. Because previously, if you see that during a medieval history and even towards a modern history, you find that there seemed to be a conflict between science and religion. But now with time, you see that every religion wants to base its practice in science, because you find that science has become the most important idea. Any kind of, say, if you want to push any point, if you want to further your agenda, you would definitely look into various scientific aspects. This is how it is right. So this is which is also becoming a reason for communal violence. Saj, when Rahul gets examples from the contemporary society, unless until someone is convicted, unless until it is proved in the court of law that the person is doing that, it is better not to use the name. Yes, it is good that we are able to understand that what is happening around, that how various religious political leaders communalize the masses, communalize people. And it is not just again limited to these sects, because it is extended to any of the group which can articulate. Just think about the role of various student unions. Think about the role of various student unions in communalizing people. Why? Because students, they are educated. With education, they have a better capacity to articulate, but they can use that articulation in any direction. They can use it for a negative purpose, they can use it for a positive purpose. So yes, any section of the society which can articulate, any educated section for that matter, think of the middle class. And now you find that growing, it is your middle class which is becoming responsible, directly and indirectly becoming responsible for various communal conflicts that are happening. Because they have the means, they have the power of articulation, and they are the ones who spread these ideas. Because whatever you get, it is just a minute. It will take a minute to forward it, and even less than a minute. Most of the time, you don't even read it completely, but yes, send it across. Why? Because the idea, the basic premise is something related or something in consonance or in congruence with your own political religious ideology. So ethnocentrism is belief, the belief wherein people from that community think that we are superior, which takes a form of a very unhealthy race between people from various ethnic groups, various religious groups, where they would want to prove that our practices are better than yours. If we say you pray with open hands, we pray with hands closed. The one side would say that praying with open hands is better. The other side would say no, praying with closed hands is better, with folded hands is better. Right. So just trying to show your superiority compared to other religious or ethnic group. So misinterpretation of religion, then also the problem related to forced conversions. Because one idea is someone is converting to another religion out of their own free will, then there can be forced conversions. Now these forced conversions are not just conversions happening on gunpoint, not always conversions happening on gunpoint, but providing with handouts, giving a gift, or say if people are poor, providing them food or maybe a place to live, better clothes, and then enticing them to convert to their religion, which also is a form of forced conversion, or rather you can call it a subtle coercion. Right. So this can also become a reason of communal conflict. And you have seen various movements, need not name me, but you have seen various movements like say Ghar Wapsi for that matter, which was more of forced conversion rather than people converting with their own free will. And you can say that the idea of subtle coercion, wherein people are being provided gifts, etc., providing housing facilities, food, job, and then enticing them to convert. Ultimately, the person is converting out of their own free will. But you find that the impression that the act of benevolence provides is in a way forced. Okay. Now coming to the primary idea, coming to the primary reasons behind the spread of communalism. Now, yes, because of poverty, communalism can happen. Because of differences or economic disparity between various groups, it can become a problem. Because of competition for the same resources, communalism might happen. The people fighting for the same set of resources, people from various religious groups living in the same place, fighting for the same resources. But the primary reason behind your communal conflict or communal violence for that matter is your politics and the role of media, the negative role of media. So if you think of various say political speeches, various hate speeches that have been given before the election as a preparation for the election, because right now you have seen that as we near 2024 election, you find that slowly and steadily various kind of communal issues will start coming up. There will be political leaders from all the religions without any discrimination. They will go on talking trash about the other religion, talking trash about the other political party, which is going to become a problem, right? And the basic idea behind this is people from one religious group, they would tend to vote to their own leader who will come in the society and say that, see, I am the one who is going to ultimately take care of my community, who is ultimately going to take care of my religion. I am the one who will safeguard the religion. I am the one who will provide you things, will provide you basic facilities. And if the other party or the other political leaders comes into power, they are not going to take care of you. And they will cite some examples, some isolated examples, that they are going to commit violence against you. So it is better you vote for me and I will take care of you. Ultimately, we know that they would not even show the faces for 2-3 years once they are elected. But yes, before the election, they are going to consolidate their vote bank. And for the sake of consolidating this vote bank, they will go on inside like hatred amongst people. And then this will be followed by the other political and religious leader as well, which can ultimately lead to a stress between these two communities. So the basic problem behind communalism or the communal violence is your communal politics. That communal politics, that they say that they are the ones who will pass on this idea that you belong to the same religion, all your interests are same. You can be a peasant, you can be a student, you can be an elderly, but all your interests are same. Why? Because you belong to the same group. They are the ones who will take them gradually to the second phase and say that, see, our interests and their interests are different. And ultimately, these political leaders and these political parties are the ones who will say that, see, we have conflicting viewpoints, we have conflicting interests. It is either us or them. What do you choose? And with this kind of communal politics, they break the society, they divide the society, and ultimately rule. And this is what I was trying to say when I was saying that Britishers, yes, it can be only Britishers that they initiated this problem of communalism in our society in India. But ultimately, what our political leaders are doing today is the same. Because this is a very brilliant technique or brilliant method to distract people from other issues. Because the poor is not able to have food. That is actually his problem. People are not able to access health facilities. That is their problem. People do not have clean drinking water. That is their problem. But making them believe that these are not problems at all. Just wait. The problem, the actual problem that you are going to face in the future is from the other religious community. That they are going to steal the resources from you. They are going to make you poor. And people who are innocent, people who are not literate, people who do not have the same articulation, power and reasoning as you do, they fall for this. And they think that, yes, ultimately he or she is the leader who is going to help us. And they do not understand that they are the ones who are responsible for this situation that they are living in. They are the ones who are not giving due importance to sanitation in our community. They are the ones who are not giving due importance to generating more employment in our community or in our country, which is basically the problem behind the standard of living that they have right now. So this is communal politics, and there are various factors. So with communal politics, they'll come politics of appeasement, politics of appeasing one community. They'll feel that okay, in this region, this particular religious group is dominant. This particular religious group has more numbers, and they'll try to consolidate that. And they'll say they'll take just one side, which can be thought of in terms of majoritarian politics as well. Because if you think about this, we say that politics of appeasement and politics of appeasement, particularly for the minorities, right? We think of politics of appeasement particularly for the minorities, but if you look at it, you'll find that politics of appeasement will always happen for the majority, because majority forms the majority vote bank. Majority is the one who's ultimately going to elect you, who's going to bring you to power. And then you can think of the role of various state and non-state actors. You can think of other countries, or you can think of Pakistan for that matter, that they will convert a regional conflict or a conflict between a state and between the center and the state into something communal. Right? So the issue related to Kashmiri migrants can be thought of here. The issue related to the idea of separation of Kashmir can be related here. And then the idea of delayed justice that I have told you already, that people will already have that impression in their mind, because they are the ones who are victims, they are the ones who have faced this problem. And if they are not rehabilitated in time, if they are not given justice in time, they will have this feeling of communalism forever in their mind. Okay. Okay, yes, I got your point. Just don't use those in answers. Yes, so justice delayed is justice denied. Great. Okay, so I hope you have understood the idea of communalism. What is communalism? Various phases of communalism. What are the various factors which lead to communalism, and also what are the various assumptions behind communalism? And we have definitely proved those assumptions wrong. Right. Now let's look at a question that they have asked. Communalism arises either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. Argue by giving suitable illustrations. Argue by giving suitable illustrations. Now just think of this question. First thing is that the body part or the main theme of the question has to be around power struggle and relative deprivation. We'll come to these. Now, again, your solution can be very simple, or your conclusion can be very simple. You can think of solution or various suggestions for fixing this issue. You can just conclude on a positive note with various suggestions for fixing this issue. It can be simple. Now, first, let's think of introduction. The statement says communalism arises either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. Now, do not think of starting with any kind of examples, because ultimately you have to use these illustrations, use these examples in your body part. Yes, great. So Amish is suggesting there are other factors as well. Apart from relative deprivation and power struggle, there are other factors which lead to communalism as well. Great. Any other idea that anyone is coming up with? Because even I am in favor of this idea that let's start with other factors. That there can be various factors which can lead to communalism, and then you move on to the body part, wherein you talk specifically about power struggle and relative deprivation. So Ravi is saying that power struggle is leadership that leads to rights, whereas relative deprivation is masses causing rights. Yes, you're right to a great extent, but also when you think of power struggle, it is not merely political power, right? It can be social dominance as well. So let's not miss out on that point for that matter. Okay, so Muskan is suggesting history of communalism in India. So yes, that is one of the other factors. In other factors, you can definitely think of historical factors. You can think of what? Psychological factors. You can also think of various other social factors. So it is better to give a complete, say, not the complete list, but yes. Yes, so power struggle can be economic or social dominance as well. So yes, there can be about evolution of communalism, and also you can think of giving a simple idea about communalism in the introduction. Just giving a brief definition or the idea of communalism, what communalism is. Yes, so Rashmi, now great. Rashmi is suggesting, why can't we talk about the overlap between power struggle and relative deprivation? Great. That there can be an overlap between these. That communities might feel that they can be relatively deprived in the sense of political power as well. They feel that we are not adequately represented in the legislative bodies, which can ultimately lead to a power struggle between the communities. Great. Okay, so I think two ideas for introduction are more than sufficient. So one idea is you talk about what can be the other factors which can lead to communalism. Then you can also think in terms of overlap between power struggle and relative deprivation. Now let's come to what comes under power struggle. Now let's come to what comes under power struggle. Now this struggle for power can be political, economic, social, right? Similarly, this deprivation can also be on these lines. So you can think of meant for, say, political power, not having adequate representation. Then you can think of the competition that communities have between them, the economic competition that takes place in your market areas. Then think about other factors as well. What can be contained within power struggle? So yes, Style is giving an example of Jinnah's power struggle or struggle for power led to partition of the country. No, see, Muskan, we don't have to talk about vote bank politics, right? So yes, vote bank politics is a way. Vote bank politics is a way in which people can be communalized. We have to restrict ourselves to power struggle and relative deprivation. Think of, see, power struggle, think of minorities for that matter. If people belong to a minority community, they would always find less representatives. They'll always find less number of political representatives. And hence they might feel that we are lagging behind because there is absolutely no one to think of our interests, right? Similarly, if you think of economic deprivation, if you let's not give examples of various political leaders of today, you can definitely give examples from the past. Okay, so there can be the communalism can arise out of power struggle because people or see various political leaders or political groups can communalize people just because they want to consolidate them as a vote bank, to gain power, to gain political power. That is in your communal politics. That is basically the subject matter of your communal politics. Similarly, it can happen because one community might feel that if you look at the other community, we are relatively deprived. Our socio-economic indicators are low compared to the other community. Why is it? The other community is the reason, which can also lead to relative deprivation. But again, as I've given you examples, do not just restrict relative deprivation and power struggle to either your masses or your leaders, because it can happen either way. It can happen either way, because the masses might feel that we are not adequately represented. Okay, so I hope you got the idea to write this question. I hope you got this idea. So what you have to do is, rather than segregating these two in the body, use paragraphs and also portray the relationship between the both. When you talk about power struggle, you think of power struggle, you do not have to write political, economic, social. You just think of this power struggle in your head and write accordingly. You do not have to categorize it into various dimensions. It is just for the sake of your understanding that when you think of power struggle, it need not always be political power. Yes, the question indicates towards political power, but we have to think of other factors as well. Similarly, when it comes to relative deprivation, this relative deprivation, because they have not said relative economic deprivation or say political power struggle. So when they have not said so, and it's better to include the other dimensions as well, because otherwise you'll have just 2-3 points. Now you can have multiple points to write to justify the answer. Okay, so this was the idea behind communalism. What can be the various factors? Why is this still continuing? The primary thing is your communal politics. Then apart from that, you find people do not have the same level of tolerance anymore, because it is not just continuance of communalism. You find an increase in the say communalization of society, in the communalization of our country. There has been an increase over the years. Why? Because the levels of tolerance are going down. Similarly, you still have various socio-economic disparities prevailing in the country, because that also becomes a say starting point for communalism. So people might feel that the other community is faring well and we are not. We are lagging behind in all the socio-economic indicators. And these politicians, these socio-political leaders will make them believe that it is the fault of the other community that you are in this situation. So you do not have to look at these factors in isolation. You do not have to look at these factors in isolation. These factors go hand in hand. At the base of it, at the heart of it is going to be your communal politics, because ultimately someone has to radicalize you. Someone has to tell you that, okay, this is the problem. Someone has to articulate this for you. Then there is this idea of religious fundamentalism. And if you remember from your social religious reforms, one idea was revivalism, reviving the old traditions. Then there was this idea of fundamentalism, going back to the fundamentals, sticking to the fundamentals, literal translation of the religious text, rather than trying to understand the idea behind it, literal translation of the text and following that idea. That was the difference between revivalism, where you are trying to revive various religious practices, and fundamentalism, sticking to the fundamentals. And now you find that there has been a wave of revivalism that is going on in pretty much every religion. Why? Because if you remember, in society we say that for every action there is going to be an opposite reaction. It need not be equal, but there will always be opposite reaction. So the action of, or the act of, or the process of secularization over the years has come also. You have secularization happening, decreasing importance of religion, and as a challenge to this, as a reaction to this, you find a rise in religious revivalism and fundamentalism. And it is not just limited to India, but this is something that you find everywhere. Right? This is something that has become a global thing. Why? Because with secularization, the importance of religion was on a decline. Now they would want to revive. There will be certain sections who would want to revive their religion. So revivalism is basically reviving your various practices related to religion. Fundamentalism, on the other hand, is going back to the fundamentals. That this is the text, the spiritual text that you have is infallible. Whatever this text says is right, and we have to proceed in this manner. And you find that it is not just religious fundamentalism or revivalism. You find that there has been an overall reaction to the modernizing forces. It is not just limited to religion, right? When it comes to your various cultural practices, more and more communities are trying to revive the old cultural practices, but which is not a problem in itself. So if there has been a decline of religion, if you feel that we are not following various say religious ritual practices anymore that we should, yes, you can go for it. But when this religious fundamentalism and revivalism takes a very hard stand, it becomes a problem. Because for religious fundamentalism, you do not need another religion. For religious revivalism, you do not need another religion. The way we are saying that for communalism, you need other religion. That there has to be other religion, and you have to react to that religion. Because that is the basis of communalism. But if you look at fundamentalism or revivalism, they are simple. They are talking about their own religion. They're talking about reviving their own religion. They're talking about going back to the fundamentals of their own religion. But once they take this hard stand, it leads to the same unhealthy competition that we are talking about. It leads to an unhealthy competition between various religious groups. That okay, you are going back to your fundamentals, we are going back to our fundamentals, and let's see whose fundamentals are stronger. So this is how ultimately it can lead to a communal conflict. Yes, so with this fundamentalism, all the other things will be covered. So your misinterpretation of religious texts, misinterpretation of history. Ultimately, these are also reasons for continuance of communalism. Because one side we say that the world is undergoing this wave of secularization. At the same time, we find a rise in the communal conflicts. So what can be the reasons for continuance? And you'll find all these reasons have already been mentioned behind. So what you have to do is, if a question is asked in a different way, you should be able to deal with it. That is the reason for this, for me adding this. Yes, so yes, no holy text, be it of any religion, talks about inciting violence against other people, other communities. But yes, you can definitely misinterpret it. Your religious leaders can definitely misinterpret those texts and ultimately make it a problem. Okay. Apart from this, you have nothing but various suggestions for keeping say check on communalism. This is something that you can go through, because you already know with the problems, with the factors for communalism, you already know what can be the suggestions. Communal politics being a problem, keep a check. Let your election commission come in. Let your election commission regulate these hate speeches, etc. well. Then you are saying that poverty, unemployment is a problem, deal with them. You're saying negative role of social media is a problem, regulate social media, let it become a positive vehicle rather than being say negative agent of spreading communalism. Regulate it better so that people or the say agencies who are spreading this violence or who are misleading people should be kept under check, should be penalized, and at the same time promote positive form of positive form of, say, your news or any form of media. Then also you can think of, if misinterpretation of your history is a problem, let's keep a check on it. So the problems that we have seen, you can just think of solutions. You can just think of solutions on the same level. The only difference, the only factors apart from this is what happens on the psychological level, right? Which will also come with awareness and education. Which will also come with awareness and education, because that is the only part where you would not be able to understand. So just think of the role of media, the role of awareness and education to fix that issue. Okay, so with this, I think we have pretty much covered every dimension of communalism. Just remember, the way they have asked question on 2 dimensions, they can ask a question on other dimension as well. And then also the continuation and rather the increase in the incidence of communal violence, even when we say that the world is undergoing secularization over the years because of modernizing forces. What are the reasons for the continuance? Again, they are based in basic factors which lead to a spread of communalism, and they can be taken from there. Now, apart from all these measures, one important measure is secularism, which is another solution or another suggestion against this challenge of communalism. And now what we'll do is we'll take a break, and post that we will start discussing secularism. Now this is something you have already read in polity, and this is something that we primarily understand as secularism of the state, right? State being secular. So we will cover that idea, but we'll also talk about other considerations related to secularism. A role of election commission, Sahil already suggested. Think of election commission. You think of the composition of election commission. Yes, recently again it has been in news as well. Just think about it. Okay, so let's take a break. If education is the most important pillar to lead this country, then whatever that happened in Manipur, all the people, those who were in that crowd, are they illiterate and uneducated? See, you cannot say that whoever was the part of the mob was illiterate, but yes, you can definitely say that everyone was misled, that everyone was misled to the same very level, that they committed the acts of violence against women, and not just women but humanity in general. It is not necessary that everyone was illiterate, but ultimately with education, with better levels of awareness, we can stop these things from happening. But we cannot always say that everyone in that mob was illiterate. So now moving on to the next theme, that is secularism. Now secularism is something that finds a mention in your constitution, that finds a mention in preamble of the constitution. Yes, it was added later, but yes, there are other principles provided in our constitution which reflects on the same idea, Now when we talk about secularism, this is something that you have already read in polity, because you start your discussion with constitutional development and then move on to preamble. And while discussing preamble, you read about secularism and the models of secularism. Now also, the questions that have been asked so far have been related to various models of secularism that we will discuss, that we will cover. But also you have to see that it is you should not limit your understanding to secularism, but think of secularization as well. That it is not just secularism of the state which is required, but overall decommunalizing the masses, decommunalization of the society is something that is required. Also, do not think of secularism as opposite of communalism, because when we were talking about communalism, we were talking primarily about communalism which leads to communal conflict, which leads to communal violence, and we were talking about people or social groups who are involved in it. Yes, your political leaders have a role to play and have a very important role to play when it comes to spreading communalism. But when you come to secularism, one idea is that it has to be looked at from the point of view of the state and also from the point of view of people in general. So the secularism or secularization you would think of is, yes, opposite of communalization or communalism. But the secularism that we are going to discuss is primarily going to be focused towards role of the state and secularism. So the basic idea of secularism says that the state has to be devoid of religion. The state should not follow any religion. State should not be formed on the lines of religion. Your policies should not be formed on the lines of religion, should not be according to, say, various, say, rituals of religion. Just think about this. If we talk about any policy which is primarily focused on one religious group, what would it be? It would be unsecular. Why? Because various religious elements have been dragged into policy making. So secularism, the primary idea is detachment of state and religion. So when we say state, you can think of the nation at large and various arms of state. Think of your government, think of your legislature, think of your judiciary, right? So the entire political process being devoid of religion, not focused on religion. That is what secularism is. And in the context of India, when we think of secularism, we do not have to follow the same idea of being devoid from religion. Yes, the term that is used is secularism, which primarily means the same, which primarily means devoid of religion. But in India, you find that the Indian constitution, neither the Indian constitution or the Indian politics is devoid of religion. We have different principles that we will come to. Sahil. Now, the first question is, why do we need secularism? Why do we need the state to follow secularism? One idea is that when we were talking about communalism, we were saying that even though we have this diversity, that does not necessarily mean that people will have communal conflicts amongst them. But if we think of secularism of state, what can be the reason? Yes, definitely for a diverse country like India. But why? India is a diverse country in terms of religion, but why at all do we need secularism of the state? That is the first question. Because yes, so Vaishnav is saying that the state has to be impartial. If the state is devoid of religion, if the state does not enter the matters of religion, what will happen to the minorities? What will happen to the diverse culture? Because don't you think in a democracy, ultimately we say that it is rule of the majority. And if we are a democracy, if we are a rule of majority, what happens to the minority? Think of your religious minority. Who will safeguard their practices? Who will safeguard various components of their religion? And that's where we say that secularism is important. And this secularism is not something that is detached or say detachment of religion from state or state from religion. It is something different that we will come to. So yes, it is to maintain this unity, because ultimately, if India is not secular, India, say, goes with the majority religion. Say India says that tomorrow we want to become a Hindu nation because the majority of the people living in a country are Hindus. Now, don't you think it will lead to discrimination against people belonging to other religion? Don't you think it will incite the feeling of communalism in people? Don't you think the idea of power struggle and relative deprivation will come into picture? So that's why that is the basic requirement, that is the basic need of secularism in India. Now, you already know about various provisions in the constitution related to religion, the right to religion, right to safeguard your practices, right to open up educational institutions. Then similarly, you find this word secularism mentioned in the preamble of your constitution. The word secular that was added by your 42nd amendment is there in preamble of your constitution. So the preamble says that our constitution has to be, or the state that is India has to be secular in nature. Similarly, you'll find that in various judgments, and particularly your S.R. Bommai case judgment, the Supreme Court was of the view that secular character of the Indian Constitution is something fundamental and is something that cannot be changed. Yes, there have been talks of changing the Constitution or suggesting changes, far-reaching changes to the Constitution in the recent past, and not past, but yes, it was there 2 days ago, and there are different arguments, etc. But the Constitution that is there, the Constitution that all of us together have accepted, have adopted, talks about India being secular. So now, in context of India, let's take up the idea of secularism one by one. So one is the Indian context, and the other one is your Western concept. Now think of Western society first. Now the Western form of secularism that we find is basically based on the American model, which says that state should not enter the domain of religion, and religion should not enter the domain of state. There should be no relationship between state and religion. Neither state can interfere in the matters of religion, nor religion can interfere in the matters of state. There has to be a wall of separation between religion and state. Why so? Because if you look at the background, you find that the Western states, most of the Western states, and particularly the US, they had one religion, in terms of religious diversity, they were homogeneous. There was only one major religion, that is Christianity. And you'll find that during your medieval era, religion was on its peak. The importance of religion was on its peak. And with this importance, or with the sphere of religion not limiting itself to religion, rather getting into the domain of your politics, getting into the domain of your society, was becoming a problem for the state to function. So if you look at the church during your medieval period, it was way stronger. If you compare it with today, it was way too strong. Now church, because they have people, because they have the social backup, they are the ones who are going to decide who's coming to political power. They are the ones who are going to decide what kind of laws have to be formulated. And ultimately you find that this interference of religion in politics was becoming a problem for the political class. And that's where you find the idea of secularism was pushed. And one idea is that you see, moving from medieval to modern period, there has been secularization which was happening, right? People were more inclined towards rational ideas. People were getting more and more inclined towards science and technology, or any arguments based in science. And thereby a decline in religion was already happening, decline in importance of religion. And when the modern states were, say, put in place, when the modern states were, say, built, you find that they went for a complete separation between religion and state, between religion and politics. Now, when we say that this idea or this concept of wall of separation between church and the state is negative, the basic idea is negative something is where you restrict something. You are restricting religion from entering the domain of state. You are restricting state from entering the religion of or entering the domain of religion. What is that? Negative. Right? You are restricting, you are putting restrictions. But when you come to India, you find that this concept becomes positive. Rather than creating a wall of separation between religion and state, India went for a model of treating every religion equally. Why? Because one thing is that we have the diversity, we have multiple religions in place. So rather than creating this wall of separation between church and the state, India went for having equal protection and respect for each and every religion. Be it Hinduism, be it Christianity, be it Islam, be it any other religions, you find that Indian state maintained equidistance from each and every religion. Now you can question this idea saying that when you think of positive discrimination, how is it equidistant? When you think of positive discrimination, and that is there in your right to religion, that the state can positively discriminate, how does it remain equidistant? That we will come to. But the basic idea is, rather than the idea of dharma nirpekshta, because if you translate secularism to Hindi, it is dharma nirpekshta, devoid of religion. The Indian constitution follows a principle of sarva dharma sambhav. That is, every religion is equal. They accord equal respect and equal protection to each and every religion. Because the basic difference between the Western society and Indian societies is diverse in terms of religion, whereas Western society had one major religion. And also, you find that the religions are not, the various religious groups are not equal in numbers. So we have a majority religion, that is Hinduism, and then we have various minority religions as well. So to provide protection to these minority religions, Indian state went with this model. Now it is positive. Why? There you were restricting something. Here you are providing equal protection to everyone. So in that sense, it is positive. Now again, it is not necessary. Again, I'll repeat this point. It is not necessary that if you have a majority religion, they will overpower all the other minority religions and they will move ahead in their own way. That is not necessary. But with various evidences, we find that this is what ultimately the problem comes up to, that the majority religion would expect other religions to get get subsumed within the majority religion. And also in democracies, the problem is that it is always the rule of majority. It is always the rule of majority, because they will have the majority people will have most number of, say, representatives in the parliament, and which can become a problem in the future, that other religions might think, or other religious groups might think, that the state is biased towards one particular religion. So to prevent this biasness of state towards one particular religion, the idea of secularism, and also positive discrimination just for the reason of safeguarding the interests, various practices of these minority religions. So this is the idea of secularism in Indian context. Now, the kind of questions that they have asked in the past are basically about the comparison between the two, about the comparison between the Western concept and the Indian concept. So what we'll do is, first we will look at various features. I hope you got the broader idea about secularism in India, the concept of secularism in India, how it is different from the West. Now what we'll do is we'll look at various features of both the Western and the Indian concept. And also what we'll do is we'll try to bring about differences between the two, because two questions on the similar lines have been asked in the past. So think of Indian concept first. Equal protection by the state to all religions. State maintains equal distance with all the religions. So yes, the question would be whether the state can enter the domain of religion. Yes, definitely it can. It talks about providing, it talks about, the Indian Constitution itself talks about having educational institutions, having various religious organizations. Then also, can religion enter the domain of politics? So one is religion as a part of politics, as a part of, say, the way you thought of communal politics, right? So communal politics can be one form of religion entering the domain of politics. Can there be other forms of religion entering the domain of politics? Can you give some example where religion enters the domain of politics? Any ideas? Think of various religious identities that people have. No, you do not have to think primarily in terms of communal politics. You do not have to think in terms of communal politics. Apart from that, yes, so yes, untouchability. Untouchability primarily related to religion, that is Hindu religion, and then abolishing that practice. Ban on triple talaq, great. Then you can think of Sabrimala. Then you can also think of the state not being neutral to every religion. So for instance, you have Sikhs who have a few identities that they carry of the religion. Now, even though you find that generally most of the states across the world, what they do is they do not allow any kind of religious or social identity to enter the domain of, say, defense. That everyone has to be equal. There has to be absolute uniformity. But the Indian system does not follow the same. Great. Yes, so protection to inter-religious, intercaste marriages, etc. Great. Yes. So therein you see that the state is not neutral to the citizens. For Indian state, the socio-economic background, the socio-economic identity of the citizens also matter. Whereas in West, you'll find that it is just the political identity, that whether you are a citizen of the state or not, that is the only identity that matters. Whereas in case of India, you find your socio-economic identity also matters. Your religious identity also matters. So Indian state is not completely devoid or detached from religion. There has been interference of both religion in the domain of politics and politics in the domain of religion. Then it does not favor one at the expense of others. But yes, there are exceptions of positive discrimination. There is, say, there are provisions for religious minorities, for that matter. So yes, it is equal. It does not favor one. It treats everyone equally. But there can be positive discrimination for that matter. Also, the state does not have adopted a religion of its own. The state has not adopted a religion of its own. So Indian state, for that matter, is secular. Can you give example? Can you give example of any other state which has adopted a religion? Any other state which has adopted a religion? So yes, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, examples, great. So Shivam is suggesting Ram Mandir dispute being the entry of politics in religion. Great. So yes, Indian state does not favor one religion at the expense of other. It protects every religion equally. It has an equal relationship with each and every religion. Then the state does not adopt a religion of its own. Then you look at the Western concept. In Western concept, we said that there is a wall of separation between the church and the state. And why we are saying church? Because Christianity is a major religion there, and church being one of the, say, important institutions related to Christianity. So there is a strict separation between religion and state. Then there is mutual exclusion of both of these from each other's affairs. So state does not enter the interest or the domain of religion, neither does religion enter the domain of state. Now also you'll find that it is, so someone has asked a question, and let's address this here as well, here itself. So the question that someone has asked is, why can't India go for the Western concept? That is one question. And let me come to this after this argument. So if you see that increasingly even your Western countries are now not, the Western states are not that detached from religion now. Just think about the various discussions, debates that are going on around wearing burqa in France. Think about letting your Sikh soldiers enter the forces with the various identity markers that they wear. So even Western states are moving towards the Indian concept of secularism. At the same time, if I try to answer this question, why can't we go for Western concept? If we think of India going for the Western concept. Now India, this is the state. India now says that the state and various religions that are there, state has nothing to do with these. State has nothing to do with these. Think of this. Now state would not protect these minority religions. They would not protect their practices. They would not protect their various institutions. There would not be any positive discrimination. What might happen? Don't you think that because India being a democratic state, it will generally be the will of the majority that will prevail? It will be the will of the majority that will be there, that will, say, translate into political will. Don't you think that culturally the major religion will subsume the minority religions? So how do we protect this diversity if we go for the Western concept? How do we protect our minorities if we go for this Western concept? And also you find that increasingly even the Western countries, Western states are moving towards the Indian concept of secularism. Getting back to it, so Western concept says there is a strict wall of separation between the state and religion. They do not enter each other's domain. There is mutual exclusion from each other's interests. Then also, religion is a private matter. The idea of citizenship takes the center stage here. So the Western idea of citizenship is they would not discriminate on the basis of socio-cultural background that you are coming from. For the state, the only identity that you can carry is that of a citizen. That is basically a political identity. Citizens do not have any social identity as far as state is concerned. In the eyes of the state, every citizen is same. And they would not protect any minority religion. They would not protect interest of any religious group for that matter. See, adopting, Anushka is saying that during COVID, even Western countries went for, say, burning the corpse, or basically going with the traditional Indian way of doing it. But again, that is a practice. That is just a religious practice, right? So even they went from shaking hands to folding hands, as say, as a matter of greeting each other. But that is just practice. We are talking about the concept, the broader concept, that the state is now, the Western states are now increasingly considering socio-economic and religious background of their individuals, of their citizens. So let's see, the you are talking about church entering the domain of politics. See, yes, ultimately, they are also, Western countries are also divided in various sects. If not, they might be homogeneous in terms of religion. But then there are increasing number of people who do not follow any religion. There are increasing number of atheists there. Then also, if you think of, say, church, the role of state or a role of church in abortion, right? Yes, they are doing that. Yes, they are lobbying for that. But it does not mean that the state is going to give in to those demands, right? And they haven't, for that matter, because it is people, because people are still related to the religion. People still follow their religious practices. People still believe in their religious leaders. But ultimately, the state would not take this decision on the basis of religion. They might take this decision on any other moral ground but religion. So that we cannot think of. So yes, if India adopts the Western concept, it might facilitate communal violence. Why? Because people from minority regions will feel that we are losing our cultural practices, we are losing our religious practices, we are being subsumed in the major religion. Then they might feel relatively deprived of power, relatively deprived of resources. Again, let me make this idea clear. Just think of the situation where the state, where the Indian state detaches itself completely from religion. Just think about what will happen to the minorities. Just think about their cultural practices. Just think about the political power. Just think about the struggle for resources. So ultimately, the way you are thinking for religious groups, just think about your weaker sections. Just think about your economically weaker sections. If state tomorrow says that we are not going to distinguish or we are not going to discriminate on the basis of your economic background or your social background, what would happen? Then there would not be any reservation provided to certain educationally and socially backward classes. Then the state would not invest in public infrastructure. The state would not provide any kind of insurance schemes for the poor. The state would not provide for free education for the poor. Don't you think this practice of maintaining complete equality or maintaining complete separation from affairs of the citizens would be discriminatory in itself? And the same logic has to be extended to various religious groups. It is not protection from majority, it is basically preserving the diversity. We have to think of it in a positive way, that we are preserving the religious diversity that we have. Okay, so one is Western concept, which is primarily negative in its outlook. They talk about separation of religion and state, whereas Indian concept talks about equal respect and protection to each and every religion. With this, you would have understood the basic idea of what Indian and Western concept is. Just look at this question and you have the answer in the next slide, and we will just go through it once. Yes, so exactly, Vaishnav. So Vaishnav is saying that what will happen to the practice of untouchability? What will happen to the practice of sati? What will happen to the practice of triple talaq if the state does not interfere in the matters of religion? Okay. How is the Indian concept of secularism different from the Western model of secularism? How these two concepts are different. Now, this is what we have discussed, because it is always easier to look at two, say, competing ideas, drawing differences between the two. It is always easier so that you can differentiate. Now, you have already gone through what has to be the body part, and your body part is hair, right? Your body part is hair, wherein you have all the differences that are there between the Indian idea of secularism and the Western idea of secularism. Let's go back to the question and think of introduction and conclusion. Body is done, and conclusion. Think of introduction. Body will, yes, contain the differences between the two models of secularism that has been provided here. So what can be various introductions? So yes, one can be the background of both the societies. One can be the background of both the societies. Yes, you can highlight the significance of Indian model in Indian context. You can think of diversity. You can think of diversity in India, and then think of significance of the Indian model. Yes, so that is basically the significance or need of secularism. Yes, you are right. So yes, one idea is giving background of both the societies, that is Indian and the Western society, and the other idea is talk about the significance of Indian concept of secularism just in Indian context. See, the drawbacks, they have not specifically asked for drawbacks. What we can do is, and if you look at this body part, you'll find that the way we have, say, presented the Western concept, you can say highlight the problems there itself. We can highlight the problems there itself. So yes, you have to give them both equal weightage. You have to give the body part equal weightage for that matter. Okay, so if you look at this, so yes, see, Anushka, there are two ways. One is, if you look at the body part, you can highlight the background here itself in the body. That is your first point. You can alternatively link it to introduction as well, because see, if you look at this question, there's no you do not have a lot of scope for introduction for that matter, and rather than going in a point-wise format, go in a paragraph format manner. Proceed in a paragraph format here, that you take up one aspect, one feature of the Indian model, and then you take up one feature of the American model or the Western model in the same paragraph. So yes, your introduction can start with background, which will be a paragraph highlighting both. So there would not be a lot of distinction between introduction and your body. Ultimately, the points that we have are more or less limited. We do not have a lot of points. So your introduction can be, introduction can be a part of the body as well. So I hope you are getting the point. So yes, introduction, alternatively, you think about the need for secularism in India, the need for the Indian model in Indian context. That can be one form of introduction, and the other form can be give a basic introduction to the background of both the models. So if you look at this body, or look at this these two slides, you have all the points mentioned here. And also, if you start your introduction with background, then you give various differences in paragraphs, then you can end your conclusion with the significance. So the significance can alternatively come here. Okay, so pretty much everyone is suggesting the same, and you're right. You not have to, and you not have to worry about Uniform Civil Code here, because they have not asked about it. Yes, it is related in a way, the way we discussed it in your chapter on diversity, you can mention it here, right? But they have not specifically asked about UCC here. No need to end with UCC because UCC is out of question here, right? UCC is out of question. Okay, so if you look at the same question, if you look at the this question, what you can do is, it can be asked in various ways. So they have asked the question twice, but they can repeat the question in a different way. They can simply say, is Indian secularism a copy of Western secularism? What you would have to do, then you would have to again highlight the differences between the two, but in a different language. In a different language. So this question, the essence remains the same, but it has to be approached in a different manner, wherein you have to give more weightage, slightly more weightage to Indian form of secularism compared to the Western form. So I hope you can address this question. Try writing this question rather than writing this question. Please try answering this question, because here you need to give a little more importance to writing skills. The way you put your thoughts across will become more important here. See, the UCC that has been proposed, okay, let's get over UCC once. So the UCC that has been proposed, now can anyone highlight what are the various aspects of Uniform Civil Code? Has there been any discussion or any draft related to Uniform Civil Code so far? And the answer would be no. Right, so we do not know what exactly we are going to say encounter. Right, so we do not know exactly what all is covered when we talk about Uniform Civil Code. Another thing is, yes, Uniform Civil Code can be thought of something based on the Western model, because the Western society, for that matter, is more homogeneous compared to the Indian society, and yes, they can definitely reach that practice. They can definitely move in that direction. But if you look at Indian society, yes, if say you have to go here, there are two people here, one has to go there and the other one has to go here. A has to reach A and B has to reach B. So yes, we say that the paths have to be different, but at least they can go together till a certain point. That can be our line. That's where we can draw our lines of Uniform Civil Code, because after this, they might deviate in path. So let's reach this agreement. Let's reach this point. Till where can we go together? Till where we can take everyone together. That is the basic idea, because we cannot completely reject this idea of Uniform Civil Code. Yes, there can be uniformity with respect to certain things, but ultimately, if the directions are different, we cannot force them. We cannot force A to go to B dash, or we cannot force B to go to A dash. But we can definitely reach a conclusion wherein they can have similar path till a certain point, and we have to do what is done in your parliament. We try to reach consensus, because India or any country for that matter, you have people coming from various backgrounds, people have different thoughts, and what do we ultimately do? Can we address all the problems? Can we address everything? Not possible. But what do? We try to reach a consensus. Think about any of the policies. What is there? Basically, this is the objective, and let's see how we can go about it. And that is what the entire discussion in your parliament is about. How can we reach that consensus? How can we reach till this point? What is that point till where we can go together? Then maybe we can separate our paths. Because Yes, the ultimate objective is betterment of all, but the way in which that betterment of all can be reached is a question. So whether there has to be a universal basic income for everyone to take care of all the socioeconomic disparities, whether state has to move away from all these dimensions and let the private players take care of it, whether state and the private players have to go hand in hand, whether state has to increase its role and cover all the aspects. So these are the questions, these are the issues, the ideas which are contended in the parliament, and ultimately they reach a conclusion, they reach a consensus, and they move in the same direction. Okay, so again about UCC, see, if you remember our discussion on unity and diversity in the first chapter, we are saying yes, uniformity can definitely lead to unity. There's no problem in that. But when India has been following a model of diversity, while India has been following the model of unity and diversity, why can't we stick to that? One. Second is uniformity always going to lead to unity? Do you think the Western countries which are uniform in most of the aspects, do you think that they have reached that idea of unity? They have absolute unity amongst them. Staying in the same family, experiencing everything similar, say there are two siblings, they experience everything similar, they go to the same school, they follow the same culture, they have the similar religious practices. Yes, there can be uniformity, but would it necessary that unity will come out of it? Is it not possible that you are more attached to your friends who come from diverse backgrounds compared to your family members? Don't you think? Unity ultimately is not dependent either on diversity or uniformity. Unity itself, in itself is a feeling that you feel that you are connected, you feel positive about someone else, right? Irrespective of their background, irrespective of whether they look like you, they behave like you, they speak like you, irrespective of they speak different languages, they come from different cultures or not. So yes, uniformity can definitely be a necessary case, because India is a glaring example in our faces wherein we find unity in diversity, which has been there, which has been preserved for times immemorial. Yes, our constitution talks about the same. Our constitution talks about uniform civil code, that we can in the future tend towards uniformity. Don't you think when it comes to a lot of our various practices, don't you think we are sort of reaching uniformity in a few aspects? Can someone suggest what are various practices in which we find diverse people coming from diverse cultures tending towards uniformity? But the ultimate question is whether it has to be brought in from the top or it has to be bottom up. That is the question. Right, so yes, you are suggesting various forms. Look at our education system. There is uniformity. Look at our various cultural practices. Look at the dress we wear. Look at the language we speak. Yes, there is uniformity. Has it led to unity amongst us? That is the question. So yes, it can be debated, it can be contended, because you don't know what is the basic premises of someone else's argument. So what all we can do is, we can just look at various aspects of both and come with a balanced answer. So when we were talking about uniformity, unity in uniformity, we have given sufficient arguments for the same. When we have talked about unity in diversity, we have given sufficient arguments about the same. And that is all we can do, because no one can change, say, someone else's personal opinions. Right. Okay. Moving ahead, look at this question, same question asked in a different tone. That is all this question is about. So what you do is, before looking at the solution for this question, try answering this question. Try answering this question before you look at the solution. You have to use the same points, you have to use the same content. The only difference is that it has to be presented in a different manner. And you think about what can be the introduction, what can be the conclusion for that matter. Now, moving on to our next aspect or next topic, that is regionalism. Now, first thing is that if you look at these various pictures, most of you might be able to understand that, yes, because of differences, various social groups and particularly people coming from different regions are fighting against each other. So here you find people from the southern part of the country, particularly Tamil Nadu, they have gathered in opposition to imposition of a uniform language, of a same language for everyone. Similarly, you find demands for Bodoland in Assam. You find demands for Khalistan in Punjab. So you have various examples that you can see. Now, what we have to do is we have to look at the basic idea of what regionalism is, what are the various factors which influence regionalism, and then also we have to look into whether this regionalism is positive or not. But to understand all that, the first thing that you have to look into is, what is this region? If you talk about regionalism, the basis is region. As different from communalism. In communalism, the base word was what? The base word was community or commune. In regionalism, the basic word is region. Now, this region, yes, can be formed on the basis of ethnic identity. This region can be formed on the basis of geography. Think of people living in the hills, people living in the plains, people living in the forests. That is what they constitute a group on the basis of this region. Then similarly, people speaking different languages, people having different cultural practices. What can be that? Yes, they can also be factors of region. That people who speak Tamil, they are there from this region. People who speak Kannada, they are from some other region. Then there are people who speak Bengali. Then this idea of region can be on the basis of your economic development. So, for example, you'll find people talking about the tribal way of living. You'll think of urban areas, you think of rural areas. They are coming from different region, and within your states you'll find that there is a lot of difference when it comes to the culture or cultural practices of people coming from rural areas and then people coming from urban areas. Now, this region can be as big as South Asian region. All the countries of the South Asian region coming together, cooperating in matters of economy, cooperating in matters of, say, geopolitics. Then this region can be as small as people living in a particular area within a state. And they might have a sense of regionalism in them. Think of this idea of regionalism first. Now, you'll find that the place where you are born, the place where you have been brought up, you'll definitely have attachment to that place. You'll have attachment to the people who are living around you. You'll have attachment to the language that you used to speak or you're still speaking. You'll definitely have attachment to the region where you have been born and brought up. And that is not a problem. That is not a problem at all. Yes, you can think very positively about your region. You can think of your region as something good, and you'll find that on the basis of our identities or of our, say, regional identities, we form groupings. So generally you'll find that, say, North Indians, and again the region can be as big as North India, South India. So North Indians who find themselves working together in South India, in, say, Chennai, they'll tend to stay within that group of North Indians. Why? Because everyone speaks similar languages, right? The base language is same. Then the culture will be more or less same. They'll have similar eating habits. Yes, there can be differences, but we will tend to look into the similarities. What are the similarities between the culture of other people and you? Again, on the basis of language, you'll find that you'll be if you are there in Delhi or Bangalore or Pune, uh, out for studies or colleges, or studying in college or school or say coaching institutions, you'll find that you'll tend to make group, you'll tend to make friends with people who belong to the same group, who belong to the same region. So this idea of region can be related to geography, can be related to any other political idea, can be related to any cultural practice, etc. Then what is this regionalism? Having feeling, having say attachment to your own region? Yes, it is regionalism. Then where is it a problem? No, it is not. But then it will also, like communalism, it will also start increasing in intensity. So one idea is that you are attached to your region. Then moving forward, you'll feel that I belong to this region, you belong to other region. We cannot stay together, we cannot have similar interests. Based in this region, based in the cultural practices that you follow, based in the economic development of your area, you'd feel that no, we cannot stay together, we are very different. And then ultimately this idea of regionalism, this idea of affection towards your own community, getting into the way of the idea of nationalism, getting into the way of idea of development for all, that you might feel in the future that it is my region which should develop, it should be my region which should get all the resources, it should be my region which should get all the investment, it should be people belonging to this region who should prosper, who should grow, and not other people. So once this idea of regionalism starts getting into the way of the idea of India as a nation or nationalism, it becomes a problem. Why? Because ultimately, you're not thinking about betterment of all. You're not thinking about the state or the country as a whole. You're thinking in terms of your understanding is limited or your affection is limited to your particular region. And that's where, that is the breaking point wherein you find that this feeling of loyalty or feeling of affection for one's region becomes a problem of national unity. Then tomorrow you might say that we are different, you are different. We want a separate nation. We do not want to live with you guys. Then you might say that the other people coming from other region are subordinate. People coming from other region are not as superior as us. So either they should work for us or they should leave the country. And when I'm saying this, when I'm talking about the degrees of regionalism, when we are talking about the degrees of regionalism, there might be ideas coming in your head. There might be idea of Marathi Manush. There might be ideas of separation in Kashmir. There might be idea of Khalistan, right? So you'll get various ideas with the increasing degree. Now let's look at the definition of regionalism. So when you try to define it, we have to look at the extreme, if we start from here, affection for one's own region, moving towards getting in way of national unity, moving towards getting in way of national development, moving towards hatred towards other region. And this is where we have to define regionalism as a problem, So regionalism can be interpreted as extreme loyalty to a particular region, to your own region, which may undermine the interests of the nation, or the larger state that you are a part of. Now, this regionalism can manifest in various ways. As one is saying here, that regionalism might lead to separation of state, regionalism might lead to bifurcation of a state, regionalism might lead to violence against people coming from other regions. So it can manifest in various ways. So yes, as we have discussed, that regionalism and communalism are similar to a certain extent, but when you talk about regionalism, the implications are different, the consequences are different. When you think of communalism, the consequences are different. And also, the basic idea here is region. Now, this region can be based in anything apart from culture as well. It can be a mix of both. So we, coming from, say, hilly areas, we have a different culture. On the basis of that, regionalism. But when it comes to communalism, it is primarily based in the idea of religion, that it is religion which differentiates people. It is religion on the basis of which people fight. But regionalism can have variations and a mix of multiple factors. Now let's look at various characteristics of regionalism. Like the idea of communalism, it is also psychic phenomena. It is also happening on the psychological level, that yes, the way I'm saying that if you're born in a particular family, if you're born in a particular religion, you have been told or you have been socialized with various fables, stories related to your own religion, and you will definitely have a liking towards your own community. You will definitely have a liking towards your own region, unless until the experience was pleasant, right? So it is also limited there, unless the experience was pleasant. Just think of people, and we will come to that when we think of negative and positive. Just think of this, that within a region there are people coming from various backgrounds. Just think of people from various castes. Think of people speaking different languages within the same region. Because even if we talk about, say, a particular region, say Karnataka, you'll find that people in North Karnataka, they have a different dialect. They speak the same language in a different manner. Then you have people towards the coast who speak, say, Tulu. Then you have different, dialects when it comes to Kannada, when you go through the entire state. But yes, when it comes to the idea of Karnataka, when it comes to the idea of Kannada, people come together. And think of this, just think of this, and because this will lead to the negative consequences of regionalism. Just think of this, people coming from the same state, and they ultimately decide that, okay, on the basis of similarity in language and culture, we're going to create a separate state out of the nation. It is not being a part of the same nation. Say we are going to get segregated from India tomorrow. Now, if you do that, don't you think, in one way, it is homogeneous because everyone speaks the same language, everyone experiences the same culture. But don't you think there are differences, there are disparities when it comes to various socio-cultural aspects? That there might be people who speak a different dialect. They might not be huge in number. They might be minorities when it comes to their dialect. Then there are people who are rich. There are people who are poor. Then there is this gap, gender gap, when it comes to male and female population. So don't you think even within that group that seems homogeneous, if you look from outside, it seems homogeneous. Within that group, if you go deeply, within that group, you have a lot of diversity within the same group. And just keep this idea in mind. We will come to it when we think of the negatives and positives of regionalism. Coming back to the various characteristics of regionalism, one, it is a psychic phenomena. It is happening on a psychological level. And again, when we now talk about characteristics of regionalism and the other considerations, we are talking about the extreme form of regionalism, wherein people have loyalty for their region, but this loyalty is coming in way of the entire nation as a whole. Now, the idea of regionalism is conditioned by economic, social, political, and cultural disparities. Now, think about this: every state in a country, are they they uniform in terms of socio-economic development? And the answer is no. Now let's look at various areas within the same state. If you look at various areas, you'll find that there is disparity in terms of say socio-economic development of that region. There's disparity in terms of political representation in your state assembly. So when you think about this idea of regionalism, you have to see that it can be, if you take the nation as a whole, it can be a state asking for getting separated or bifurcated from another state. Then it can be a state asking for complete separation from this union. There can be states or regions asking for more autonomy, and you have examples for everything. So do not just limit the idea of regionalism to a particular state or various states fighting amongst each other, or just the idea of separation of state. It can manifest in various ways, and you see that this process, this is also a process, because even if you think about bifurcation of a state, it takes 15, 20, 30 years of protests, of lobbying in the parliament by various political parties, social groups, student unions, that ultimately that thing happens. So it is also a process. And in this process, they might change the goal, the objective as well. In the process, they might change the objective as well. So can anyone give an example of a movement which started to reach one goal, but it changed the goal midway? It is again example of a state, just to make it simpler for you, example of a state asking for separation from another state, and during the course changing the goal itself. See, the demand of Bodoland has still remained the same. The movement for Jharkhand has also remained the same. In Northeast, yes, the example again has to be based in Northeast. The one I'm talking about is in Northeast. So the example of Punjab and Haryana, also the demands were clear. Okay, so Bodoland is fine to a certain extent, because initially it was, say, it was the Assam region and various states got separated. Then there was this case of Meghalaya. They were asking for a separate state, but it got diluted over the years, and then they started demanding more autonomy. But ultimately in the 70s, they created a separate state. So just the idea was just to give you a glimpse of it, that these regional demands also change over time. These regional demands also change over time. And also your question about left-wing extremism, about any disparity, will be addressed when we talk about positives and negatives. Okay, so the demand for regionalism, or the demand for a separate region, can be based in various aspects. So a region might feel that within the same state, just think of Jharkhand and Bihar, within the same state, people belonging to this part, they felt that we are culturally different. Our culture is different. So the identity of being Jharkhandi, for that matter. Another idea was that the resources, this region of Jharkhand is resource rich, and the state of Bihar is basically taking these resources away from this region of Jharkhand and using it to develop the other region. So the sense of, again, what? Relative deprivation compared to other regions. Sense of relative deprivation compared to other regions. Similarly, if you think of Telangana and Andhra, the idea was, yes, there was a difference in dialect. Another thing was that this region is lagging behind in terms of socio-economic indicators. We have less representatives in the state assembly. Now, these ideas can be based in political, cultural, social, economic, any kind of disparity. Now this regionalism, if you think about this, that once a social group or any people coming from a particular region, they start getting this feeling that we are ultimately going to be loyal only to our region, and they stop caring about the other region. They stop caring about the other part. So your answer, Sahil is saying that once Jharkhand was taken away from Bihar or got separated from Bihar, now Bihar was left with no resources for that matter. So the idea is this feeling of regionalism, this phenomena of regionalism overlooks the needs and requirements of the other part from which they are separated, and also the nation as a whole. Because it might have been better for a particular, for two states who have got separated now to stay together. Would have been more convenient for the nation as a whole, because they could have, say, used the resources in a better manner, right? And again, yes, so the impoverishment of Bihar cannot be limited to to matters of less resources or limited resources. It has been more political in nature. The impoverishment of Bihar has been more political in nature for that matter, because now, don't you think there are other states who do not have any kind of natural resources but are still faring well? So don't you think there are other states like that? Okay, so they can presuppose the concept of development of one's own region without taking in consideration the interests of other regions. So if there is a difference, or say if there is a dispute over river water, they would only take into account their own requirements, their own needs, their own demands, overlooking demands of the other region. Think of the conflict between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Think of any river water dispute. So every region would just think about, or every state would just think about their own demands, their own needs, and they would not think about the other region. So they can also prohibit people from other regions to get benefited by a particular region. Basically, they would want only their region to prosper. They would want only people living in their region to prosper, and they would not care about others. Now again, you still, what we have to do is, you have to remember that within the same region, if we are saying that this is the larger nation, then this is the region maybe asserting its identity, and we'll see how they manifest these regional demands. You always remember that it is not homogeneous, because this is where you get your answer, whether it is positive or negative. Now, these are various contexts in which term regionalism is used. First, look at the international level, the way we were talking about cooperation between various countries based in the same region. Southeast Asian Association. Then you have, you can think of your countries coming together for same interest. Think of Quad grouping, right? They might not be in the same region, but they can again form any form of cooperation. This is mostly related to political science, so you do not have to get into here. I'm just giving you an idea that the expanse of region can be limited to a few square kilometers. Two, it can be, say, of a continental dimension. So if you think of region, we talk about the north and south divide. If you go through international relations, we talk about the north and south divide, the developed north and the underdeveloped south. Similarly, think of South Asia as a region. Think of your Indo-Pacific region, right? So it can have various manifestations. Now let's stick to our point. Let's stick to the Indian context. In Indian context, generally you find the manifestation in terms of asking for more autonomy, greater autonomy for a particular region. Just think of the demand for Bodoland. Greater autonomy within the same state. They do not want to go out of the state, but now it has changed, right? It has changed, so they do not want to go out of the same state. They want to remain a part of the same state, but with more autonomy, with more representation in the assembly, then it can be about separation. It can be about separation from the state. So, bifurcation of Punjab and Haryana, bifurcation of Punjab into Punjab and Haryana, bifurcation of a state, asking or demanding to go away or to get separated from the state. Similarly, it can also manifest in the form of protest against or reaction against imposition of a uniform identity. Think of the protests that happened in the south and particularly Tamil Nadu against the imposition of Hindi. So these can be the various forms in which it manifests, and now when we are talking about this, you'd find that you already have examples in your mind. And also to this you can add the separation from the Indian state. Now what you have to do is, so one is, this is India, this is a state asking to get separated from the state, bifurcate this state, asking for greater autonomy within the state, and then it can be asking or demands to get separated from India. So the way you are talking about Khalistan or Kashmir, the demand is for a separate state. The demand is for a separate state. So yes, there can be various instances of regionalism. A few have been mentioned here. Apart from this, just think about river water disputes, think about disputes based in language, and you are giving examples. Maharashtra, Karnataka, for instance. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. Then you have Kerala and Karnataka to a certain extent. Then within the state, you'll find that North Karnataka and South Karnataka. Yes, it cannot always be explicit demands, but yes, you'll find that there'll be a few protests, few movements here and there, because that's how ultimately it takes shape. Because your Andhra and Telangana to get separated, it took more than 20-25 years. So it starts from somewhere. There can be a particular tripping point. There can be a social group or a political group which brings the, which basically mobilizes people to come up in protest, for that matter. Okay, so these can be various instances. Apart from this, you have various issues that keep coming up in your newspapers that you need to remember, be it the demand for reservation, on the basis of your residence in a few states. Take example of Haryana, Andhra Pradesh. Then it can be the demands of ousting people from one state. So Marathis thinking of, say, that the Marathis are the ones who originally belong to this state, and other people, be it people from Bihar, be it people from Uttar Pradesh, be it people from South India, they should leave our state. So these are the various demands, regional demands that keep coming up, that you have to be aware of. You just have to use these as examples. You not have to say, go through a list and cram all of these. You just need to have examples of every kind. You need to have example of demand of separate state. You need to have example of demand for greater autonomy. You need to have examples for, say, fight over river water, etc. Because ultimately all these things can lead to serious violent conflicts. Now with this, let's conclude our discussion for today, and tomorrow we'll start with various other considerations for regionalism, and we'll look into various positive and negative aspects of regionalism, because a few of you might think that yes, betterment of one region or betterment of each and every smaller region within the country will ultimately lead to betterment of the country as a whole. Then others might think that it can become a problem because it might lead to disintegration of the entire state, of the entire country, because people would be bothered only about their own particular issues. So okay, let's conclude our discussion for today, and we will start from here tomorrow. So please try to write the questions that I've suggested. Try to write answers to those questions so that you can keep getting better. Thank you, and a good night to everyone.